Hey y'all, I'm James Wright. Welcome to my shop. I've seen several people saying that you need to buy a mortising chisel as a first chisel. Yeah, let's talk about that. I recently saw 3 different videos from different makers actually listing beginner tools, the things you should go out and get into if you want to get into hand tools. And one of the things that all 3 of them listed was a mortising chisel. So I want to talk about that today, and particularly what's the big difference between a mortising chisel and a bench chisel. These 2 chisels are both Nerix Richter chisels. They're basically the same chisel from the same company, except for one of them is a mortising chisel and the other one is a bench chisel. Both of them are about a 1/4 inch, and with the mortising chisel, if I put it on its side so you can see the bevel, it's about a 1/2 inch tall, whereas the bench chisel, I'll put it on that same side, it's about an 1/8 inch tall. And really, that's one of the only differences, other than the mortising chisel's a little bit longer. The mortising chisel is big and beefy and honking, whereas the bench chisel's a little bit more dainty, and that gives the mortising chisel one big benefit. When I'm cutting a mortise, I can whale on this thing and I can take it all the way down in, and I'm about 1.5 inches down with 3 simple hits. As a matter of fact, I probably hit bottom with 2. Whereas I can take this 1/4 inch and I can really hit it, but I'm gonna take a couple more because it goes down. And then the bench chisels tend to get stuck because I don't want to be bending on them too much. With a mortising chisel, I can put a little bit of prying into it and wiggle it out without fear of bending this thing. Whereas with the bench chisel, I just want to be a little bit more careful. I can go down the same depth, it takes a couple more hits and takes a second more to pull it out of the bench. But you'll also find a lot of antique chisels that are not flat. They're actually bent because people were prying with them and twisting them, and they get bent over time. Also, with the mortising chisel, I can go in and I can use that to then pry and lever out all those pieces. Whereas with the bench chisel, I could do that, but I don't want to pry and lever too much because I might bend this. This has the backbone enough that I can actually do some serious work with it. And I can do a lot of force on that without causing any damage to the tool. Now, I just listed a bunch of reasons why a mortising chisel is a fantastic tool. It does that task really well. So why wouldn't a beginner want this in their toolbox? Because the bench chisel can do it all too. You just have to be a little more careful on a few circumstances. One of the things that everyone agrees on is if you're first getting into hand tool woodworking, you need a set of bench chisels. This is one of the basic tools that you really need to do woodworking. Even if you're doing power tool woodworking, a good set of bench chisels is kind of a must-have. And if you've got a set of chisels that will do the work, then why do you want to go and spend the money on a one-trick pony that only does mortises well? And even there are a lot of times where I don't use a mortising chisel when I need to cut a mortise. If I'm cutting standard mortise and tenon like I'm going to find in most joinery, then I'm probably going to be using my mortising chisel. But if I'm going to be cutting these bigger things that are fairly wide, I'm not going to use a mortising chisel because even my largest mortising chisel is only half the width of this one and only, well, 1/3 of the width of this one. And if I'm cutting deep and long tenons, in that case, I don't want to use a mortising chisel to reach all the way down deep into that mortise. In those cases, I'm going to bore them out and drill out most of the waste. Then I'm going to come in with my bench chisel and I'm going to cut the rest of the mortise with my regular bench chisel. Yet no need for the mortise there because this actually does better in those thin spots where I want to get down in there and work at it. A bench chisel is the better tool for that particular task. Generally, the only time I'm reaching for a mortising chisel is when my mortise is relatively small and standard and it is wider than it is long. In all other cases, then honestly the bench chisel is the one I'm going to reach for. So if I'm going to be reaching for a bench chisel most of the time when I need to make mortises, and only in a few specific cases I'm actually going to reach for a mortising chisel, then why would I want this to be in my beginner set? Honestly, I say it's not needed for that. It's one of those things that eventually you're going to want to get, and chisels have a tendency to multiply. You get a basic beginner set, and then you buy one for that case, and you buy one for that case, and then you buy one for that, and eventually you're going to have a bunch of chisels. They're kind of like rabbits. They tend to multiply pretty quickly. And interestingly enough, if you go back and look at old toolboxes, you find people who made their living with their tools, and it is actually a little bit more rare to find a mortising chisel. You will always find a bench chisel, but very few actually had mortising chisels. And the old boxes that do have mortising chisels only had 1 or 2 of their common sizes. They didn't ever have the full set of 5 chisels. I have never used my 1/8 inch mortising chisel. I have never used my 1/2 inch mortising chisel. I've only used my 5/8 mortising chisel once. And that was a kind of a weird instance. My 3/8 I've only used a few times. It's the second most common one, but it's the one I don't use that much. My 1/4 inch though, I use all the time. Actually, I tend to prefer my old pig sticker. This one's just kind of fun, and I've got the bevel on there I like. And that's why I tell beginners, do not go and buy a full set of chisels. You don't need them, and the chances of you actually using all of them are incredibly rare. Go buy the 1 or 2 sizes that you're going to use, and then maybe down the road, maybe you'll find a place where you really need that one mortising chisel, and then in that case, go and get it. But very rarely do you need the set. It's cheaper just to buy the 1 or 2 you're going to need. Kind of like carving chisels. And even today, you're going to find regular modern woodworkers that never use a mortising chisel, even though they have the money to go buy one. They don't. And in that case, just using a bench chisel works fine. Paul Sellers, for instance, uses bench chisels to make his mortises, and he does them incredibly well, and you can't question his work. He does amazing work, and he does it all with bench chisels. No need for the mortising chisel. Yeah, the mortising chisel does it a little bit better, a little bit faster, but only in a few instances and only in a few specific characteristics. For the rest, it's the bench chisels that win. So no, you do not need to go out and buy a mortising chisel. And no, you do not need to go out and buy a full set of them. They look pretty. They're a lot of fun, but you don't need them. And honestly, there are very few instances where I would tell someone to go buy a mortising chisel soon after you've started woodworking. And even fewer that I'm going to tell, yeah, you should probably go buy a full set of them. It's one of those tools where you could go your entire career and never need it. But for a few people, they make that size mortise all the time, in which case then it may be very useful. And it may be one of those tools that you end up putting in your toolbox. Or you could be like Paul Sellers and no need for it. Now, yes, I know I just kicked a can of worms and I mixed my metaphors. But that's okay, because this is Wood by Wright, where the spelling doesn't matter and we just like to have fun around here. So I hope you like this. If you have any questions, thoughts, ideas, snide remarks, throw those down below. It does help out the channel. Anytime you like, comment, share, subscribe, it helps us more. Thank you for that. But I do want to say something, a huge thank you to all of those people over there. Those are some of the fantastic, wonderful, benevolent, gorgeous people over on Patreon. Without patrons, we would not exist. We are completely sponsored by you, the viewer. And without you, we wouldn't be here. You guys are the ones that allow this channel to exist and allow me to talk about the things I want to. And rather than stopping in the middle of the video and saying, this is sponsored by such and such a company, I don't want to do that. I want to talk about what I want to talk about and have fun with you. So I hope you like that. And if you do have a little extra income and you want to help out, then think about joining those fantastic, wonderful, benevolent, gorgeous people over there. So I think that'll do it for now. And until next time, have a wonderful day. The nice thing is, though, if you do end up going and buying a mortising chisel, it's not one of those things you're going to get bent out of shape over.